welcome, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be learning with everyone as part of Drisha's Falls Bond. We have the pleasure of learning today with Miss Rachael Gelfman Schultz on the topic of work of the heart, connecting to prayer. This is the second session. And I'm going to send out invitations to panelists. You're welcome to accept those. And you are also invited to turn on your camera if you're a panelist. All I ask is if you're not actively speaking to please mute yourself. And sources will be posted in chat, both in Zoom and on Facebook Live. And the chat will be monitored for questions, so don't hesitate to ask things. And if you want to also ask questions, unmute yourself. Just a reminder that the subject on the topic of today's class, it is often a struggle to connect the words and experience of tefillah. This course will take a look at different services, sections, and passages and words of prayer in order to better understand how each one can contribute to our experience of prayer. We will explore larger questions of how can we relate to God and ourselves through tefillah? How can we bring our doubts and questions to tefillah? How can tefillah help us rethink what we're doing in the world? Why pray at all? And with that, I want to turn things over to Rachael. Good afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Kayla. Welcome to Andrea. Although your video is not on, happy that you're here. Oh, now her video is on. Hi, Andrea, welcome. So I wanted to start, most of you were here last time, but I want to start with a summary of last class, which I feel like was a bit more associative than usual. So I just wanted to organize it and then we'll move on to this week's class. So last week's class really was a direct response to the situation here, only a week and a half after the horrific murders of October 7th. So I chose to talk about tefillah be'et tzara, tefillah, prayer out of fear in a time of great distress. And we started with the dispute between Maimonides and Nachmanides. And we saw that for Maimonides, there's a biblical obligation for prayer in general. And for Nachmanides, there's the biblical obligation for prayer is only at a time of distress. So in some way, for Nachmanides, prayer at the time of distress is like the essential prayer. And we said that sometimes, though, prayer at the time of distress can actually be, or at a time of crisis, especially when you're in the midst of the crisis, as we are, can be challenging. We're asking ourselves, where is God in this, in all of these horrors? And it can be hard sometimes to turn to God. And welcome, Nancy. And so we looked at some different sources of avenues, sort of expressing ourselves when prayer is difficult. And we spoke, and we went through a few different options. The first one, we looked at the story with Jacob and Esau, where Jacob is very, very scared that Esau is there he's coming, but he hasn't seen him in over 20 years. He's coming, and he gets a message that Esau's there with 400 men. He doesn't know whether he's coming in peace or at war, and he's very scared for the lives of himself and his family. And we saw that the first thing he did actually is not to pray, but to divide his camp, so that if one part of his family was killed, at least the other part of his family would survive. So in other words, the first thing he was focused on was survival. And only then, after he did that, was he able to pray. And then actually, interestingly, after he prayed, he was able to sort of think about his situation a bit more creatively and think about the idea of giving a gift to Esau. So that was the first source we saw. The second source we saw was the Israelites calling out to God in their suffering when they were enslaved in Egypt. And we saw that it was just sort of a screaming out without words, maybe even according to Rabbi Nachman, maybe even without a voice, but just a screaming and sort of in pain from the bottom of their hearts, not even necessarily to God. And we saw a source of Rabbi Nachman that maybe somehow through that, like calling out in pain and in suffering, that could actually in some way lead them back to God, and that God was listening. And then a third option that we saw very quickly was that sometimes when it's hard to pray for ourselves, it can be easier and maybe even more effective to pray for others. You talked about this also, Nancy, right? The idea of like praying for a community or in a community can be very, very comforting. Like we're not alone in this. So yeah, I think for me last week, the source that really resonated the most was the sort of where I was emotionally was the source about just the crying out, like not in a place of like using words or really even maybe turning to God, but just sort of crying out in the suffering, our people's suffering. Yeah, I don't know if does anyone else want to, we didn't have so much time last week to talk about where we are. Is a very personal thing. So I do want to also, is there anyone else that before we go on to this week's topic? Sorry, my internet
Rachel, your internet's
unstable. Okay, we'll see how it goes. If it's not good, I'll switch to my phone. Is anywhere else who wants to share if any of the sources from last week or any of those approaches were sort of personally resonant for them? Okay.
I'll just say,
Yeah.
I'll just say because the community did stick with me. I think it's really important. I feel it's so much more powerful to me when I'm with other people. No matter what anybody's saying privately or whatever, but it as a group, like I get the Kaddish while they want you to have at least 10 people, and I that whole thing about community is just really really powerful for me. And that really struck out to me in those readings last week as well.
For sure. Meaning that in both prayer and not in prayer, I think.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. My internet is not. Yeah, right. In prayer and not in prayer, I find like I feel much better to go outside and talk to people that dealing with anxiety and fear in general. One of them is just talking it out, and it could be talking to God, right? Like sharing our fear with God, and could be talking to other people. And they're both, very important ways of dealing with fear and, and anxiety. Okay, so thanks, Nancy. So today I wanted to do the class that I was originally going to do last week, which is a class on the morning blessings. I feel like only now, or like 2.5 weeks later, am I even like in a place where I can even like begin to think about like just sort of being thankful for life, which is basically what the morning blessings are all about, just being thankful for the gift of life. And in some ways, like in the face of death, that's like, and that, it's a very powerful thing to do, to be thankful for life. And sometimes, in some ways, it's very difficult to be in a thankful place when so many horrible things are happening. So, going to this. Right, and I think also just this week, as here in Israel, we're beginning a little bit to get back to some semblance of a routine of kids going to school a bit. I think that also, like getting back to a little bit in a place of routine also makes more space for that, thankfulness for life. We're living, we're going on living. Okay, so I'm going to share my sources. Okay, so last week we started off, we didn't look at this whole source, but we started off with a source from based in the Talmud from Maimonides, who talks about prayer being the service of the heart. And that's really how I want to look at prayer in this class, that prayer is ultimately, we also brought in the source from Rabbi Sachs, from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, alav shalom, that that prayer changes the world because it changes us. So looking at prayer as, looking at the words of prayer and the different parts of the prayer service and seeing how that can be saying those words can change us. It's not just something we do sort of by rote, but that it can be actually transformative. So in the continuation of that source from Maimonides, he talks about the three parts of prayer, which also people mentioned last week, the three different kinds of prayer. He says this commandment, and he sees this as, as all part of what does it mean to pray. This commandment obligates each person to offer supplication and prayer every day and utter praises of the Holy One, blessed be he. Then petition for all his needs with requests and supplications. And finally, give praise and thanks to God for the goodness that he has bestowed upon him, each one according to his ability. So from here, and this is also based in the Talmud, we see that there are the different kinds of prayer, right, are asking God for our needs, uttering praise, or not, let's do it in the proper order, uttering praises, asking God to fulfill our needs, and giving thanks to God. And generally it's also in that order. But what we actually start with as soon as we wake up in the morning, right, according to Jewish tradition, is we thank God for our life. We say, for returning our souls to us. I give thanks to you, living and everlasting God, for you have restored my soul with mercy. Great is your faithfulness. And yeah, so just to start us thinking, like, why is this the way we start our morning? Like, what? Yes, we have fewer people here today. In other words, why do we start our morning? Just to add another piece to this, right? We have in Vayikra Rabbah, in the Midrash, it says, Rabbi Pinchas, Rabbi Levi, and Rabbi Yochanan said, in the name of Rabbi Menachem from Galia, in the time to come, all sacrifices will be annulled, but the sacrifice of thanksgiving will not be annulled. All prayers will be annulled, but the prayer of gratitude will not be annulled. So like the prayer, giving thanks, like that kind of prayer is like the only prayer that in the time to come will continue. So just to like add to the question. So Modani is the way we start every morning. And this source in the Midrash like talks about how important giving thanks is, that this is the only thing that will continue in the world to come. Yes, or in the time to come. Yeah, Andrea, go ahead.
So I've always learned that like when you go to sleep, maybe this is sort of a mystical idea that like you're like getting close to being dead, and then you wake up and you're like very grateful to like come back to the world. So that's what I think of with the morning prayers is like, oh, I made it another day. Thank you.
Right. It's exactly that. It's not like, I mean, yes, there's definitely a mystical, you're right. Like, I don't know mysticism very well, but there are mystical sources like about that. But even not on a mystical level, right? It's just like, it's not to be taken for granted that we wake up in the morning. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else, like why is saying thank you so important, and why is it the way that we start our day? Yeah, Nancy, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Rachel,
yeah,
I don't know if you can see faces. I can't see any faces. But maybe just because
I can see
just to acknowledge that it's can you hear me?
I can hear you and I can see.
Okay, so just maybe. Oh, okay. I'm having trouble again with my computer, but it just also the acknowledgement that somebody there may have been more forces into why I was able to wake up. It wasn't necessarily all on me, that there was another power above me that helped me wake up, sort of. So it's what I mean, it's not just it's out of our control on some level, and I want to we want to acknowledge that acknowledging
that even like Sorry.
Yeah, that there's some other power there that helped me wake up, make it through the night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, acknowledging that even the very basic thing of waking up in the morning is not in our control. And it's
Right, exactly.
And if we believe in
You said
God,
it perfectly.
it's dependent on God. Or if we believe in God in that way,
Exactly.
it's dependent on God, but
Exactly.
and on something out of our control. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Dad.
Okay. Yeah, just to echo what Nancy said about this modality being sort of a baseline. I mean, before you can even talk about anything else, you do have to wake up in the morning. And I find that very stirring, very important that, just our very existence is a miracle in itself. But I also had a question, if you don't mind going back to the end of the of Maimonides, the Kol Echad Lefi Kocho, which is almost in opposition to what this says. That rather than just saying everybody the same, everybody's blessed by waking up. This sort of says, well, everybody gets it according to their ability. And I don't quite understand what they're trying to say. I mean, we actually, it's sort of a loaded phrase because I think we probably mean something different from what Maimonides may have meant by it. But just.
Are you reading each one according to his own ability that's bestowed on him, or each one, like I read it, each one.
Yeah, I don't know what it means. I guess that's what I'm asking.
Right. I read it as each one according to his ability to pray, not according to like the abilities that he's given. You know what I'm saying? You could read it either way. It sounded like you were reading it maybe more each one according to the abilities he's given, like he gives thanks for those abilities. Is that how you were reading it?
Right. I was reading it as one receives goodness according to one's ability to either make use of it or to manifest it in their life. So it was a little, as I said, the phrasing is a little loaded because Marx has changed what that means in today's world, and a little different than what Maimonides may have meant it to me.
Right. Yeah, so I read it more as each one according to his ability to pray, to thank God in unique situations. Yeah, Nancy, did you want to add something? Sorry, the internet is not great. Nancy, did you have something to add? What do you think?
No, I'm good. But you are breaking up, and I wasn't sure if it was my computer or yours.
Sorry. Oh, and I see Ellen raised her hand, but she's not a panelist. So.
Just first, can you try turning off your video and seeing if it's going to be a stronger stream without that for a second?
Yeah, it could also just go on my phone if it sort of goes in and out the internet.
Let's just give that a try first.
Okay. I see that Ellen's raising her hand, but she's not a panelist. So how does that work, Kayla?
Ellen, I just gave you permission to talk. Can you unmute yourself?
I did. Okay, thank you. So I don't mean this in a negative way, but when we're giving thanks for waking up in the morning, to some extent, that's kind of backwards facing, and maybe there's a forward-looking aspect to this that this saying Moda Ani frames our day. God gave us the day, and we're grateful, and maybe that frames how we go forward.
Yeah, I like that. It's not only giving thanks for the gifts that we already got, but it's like sort of in anticipation, giving thanks for the day we're about to have, so that we can sort of, I assume, like act in a way that shows our appreciation for this gift of a day. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that. Yeah, that it's not, because going back to Rabbi Sachs about prayer being changing a person and through changing the individual, also changing the world, like, that's showing how starting the day that way can really like change the way we go about the whole day, by starting just with the basic point of thanking God for the day and thanking God for our lives. Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, I'm gonna look at, so a lot of these points I brought together a few sources about giving thanks. Dad, do you want to read this? This is sort of what you were, one of the things that you started to touching on a bit, the Rabbi Sachs. Yeah.
Rabbi Pinchas, Rabbi Levi, and Rabbi Yochanan.
Oh, no,
said-
the next one, the number
Oh, the
4.
next one. Oh, okay, Rabbi Sachs.
Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, yeah.
Okay, in Birkot HaShachar, the dawn blessings, prayer opens our eyes to the wonders of the physical world. It trains us to give thanks for the sheer gift of being alive.
Yeah. And then the second one, you can read it too. This is sort of, I think,
That's what Ellen said.
a little bit
making-
getting, yeah, exactly. Who said that? That's what Ellen was saying, right? And
Yeah.
the second, number 5. Yeah. Someone want to read
Make-
that? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
making Making a blessing over life is the best way of turning life into a blessing. Thank you, Ellen.
Exactly. That is. Which is a challenge. That's like it's a not remembering the word I'm looking for, but it's like it's a challenge for us, to a calling sort of to turn life into a blessing. And I just love this poem by E. Cummings. Does anyone want to read it who likes to read poetry? I think really captures a lot of what we're saying in Modani. Who's a poetry reader? You don't have to be a poetry reader. Who wants to read the E. Cummings? Anyone? Mom?
Read it.
Okay, good.
I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spurts of trees and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings and of the gay, great, happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any, lifted from the no of all nothing, human, merely being doubt, unimaginable you. Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened.
Yeah, I thought, first of all, it's just beautiful, but also it's like so many themes that come up in the morning blessings. I who have died am alive again today. That's like so much of what we're saying in Modani. And also now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are open. That's what we're about to get to in the continuation of the morning blessings. Where's that? Beautiful. And then just to finish off with our sources about being thankful, and then we're going to move on to the 10 morning blessings after Modani. So I want to read this Rev Dov Zinger. So Rev Dov Zinger, just to give an introduction, if people, I don't know if anyone here knows him, he is the Rosh Yeshiva at Makor Chaim, which is like a yeshiva high school in the Gush, where actually, if everyone remembers, like several years back when those 3 kids were kidnapped and eventually found out they were killed, they were at his yeshiva. But he has done like amazing work with prayer, and a lot of sort of very personal prayer workshops, which I would love to incorporate some of those things here, but it's a little bit difficult on Zoom, but still I want to look to him a bit for wisdom. Yeah, so his book was written in Hebrew, but it was translated into English, Prepare My Prayer Recipes to Awaken the Soul. And he sort of, in his book, he gives like little exercises to do, like for being thankful, right? To write down, what are you thankful for? Just to write like a list for yourselves of things that you're thankful, like just small exercises. Yeah, so does anyone want to read and so I hope we'll read some more sources from him later as well. Yeah, and his book also, it brings together lots of different, he does have some words of his own and also these exercises, but it's also bringing together a lot of different sort of relevant sources on different themes of prayer. Yeah, so someone want to read Rav Zinger? Can I call on you, Nancy? You mind reading?
I can't read it. I'm going to read off my phone because you're halfway through on my screen. I don't know if that's me or you. So I'm going to try it on my phone. All right. We think that one who receives says thank you, but really the opposite is true. The one who says thank you is a true recipient. This person knows how to receive. When I say thank you, I first of all receive. I accept my reality. all that is happening to me. I know that I am all that I am, and I deserve nothing more. I accept the love, the plenty, happy with what is. Everything that was up till now, everything that is right now, nothing is to be taken for granted. And when, nevertheless, something is given to me, anything, I accept, I expand, I am filled. I give thanks, not only for what I've received, but also for the simple ability to give thanks.
Yeah, I like that. And we also, some themes we've already spoken about, not taking anything for granted. And also, what does it mean to receive? Like often receiving, is just as difficult, if not more difficult, depending on the person, than giving. So like, what does it mean to really, really receive in a deep way? Okay. So we wake up in the morning, we say Modani. I'm gonna see, has it helped to turn off the video?
You haven't broken up in a while, but you can try now.
Let's see what happens. I mean, I think I keep getting it's a problem with my internet, that my internet is unstable. So right now, no, I saw it just went down a little bit. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so next I want to move on to the morning blessings, the series of morning blessings, or as Rabbi Sachs called them, the dawn blessings, Berchot HaShachar. And there's a fascinating Gemara, which somehow, I don't know how, but somehow in all my learning, I had never, like, this is such like a basic Gemara, like a basic idea to know about when saying Berchot HaShachar, and somehow I had never learned this until now in preparing this class. So I wanted to share it with you because it like really like changes the way you look at the morning blessings. Okay, yeah. So can someone else read? Maybe Ellen or Angie, are you guys able to? Or
also.
you? What?
I can do it.
Okay, who's that? Kayla?
Yeah, starting
Okay, go
from
for it, Kayla.
verse number 8.
Yeah. Upon hearing,
Upon hearing the sound of a rooster, one should recite, "Blessed who gave the heart," understanding to distinguish between day and night.
right. So in other words, the first blessing of Berchot HaShachar that we say in the morning is, well, like according to the Gemara, we just say it because we hear the sound of the rooster. In other words, we don't say it in shul, everybody together, all the blessings together, but we say things as they happen in the morning. Yeah, okay, keep going.
Upon opening
keep
his
going,
eyes, one should
Mhm.
recite, "Blessed who gives sight to the blind." Upon sitting up straight, one should recite, "Blessed who set captives free." Upon dressing, one should recite, "Who clothes the naked." Upon standing up straight, one should recite, "Blessed who raises those bowed down." Upon descending from the bed to the ground, one should recite, "Blessed who spreads the earths upon the waters." Upon walking, one should recite, "Blessed who makes firm the steps of man." Upon putting his shoes, one should recite, "Blessed who has provided me with all that I need." Upon putting his belt, one should recite, "Blessed who girds Israel with strength." And on putting a shawl upon his head, one should recite, "Blessed who crowns Israel with glory."
Right. So in other words, it's like what the Gemara is describing is the person is going about doing his morning routine. And after every single thing, every part of his morning routine, he says a blessing. And those are the blessings that we now say, like at the beginning of prayer, sort of as a rote, as a rote thing. Does that make sense? In other words, all these blesseds are Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, who, Malvish Arumim, who clothes the naked, for instance, when you get dressed. So it's interesting. It's also like not necessarily like who sets captives free. You wouldn't necessarily think that's about sitting up straight, but it's interesting. It makes sense that these blessings, in other words, were once like a spontaneous reaction to what we're doing in the morning, to the different parts of the routine. So yeah. So and obviously at some point it became rote. So the question is how that happened, why it happened, and was that a good thing? So Maimonides, this is actually another debate between Maimonides and Nachmanides. So here I didn't bring the Nachmanides, but yeah. So does someone want to read the Maimonides? Yeah, these 18 blessings. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. These 18 blessings do not
So
have a
18, by the way, Chodesh Shachar alone is not 18, but he's including sort of all the blessings we say in the morning, like the blessing over the Torah, the Elokai Neshama Shenatata Bi, like all the different blessings that we say in the morning. I don't think they quite add up to 18 actually, but I guess he maybe had a little bit of a different version of what we say, but not only the, you know, the ones that we call Chodesh Shachar. Okay.
right. These roughly 18 blessings
Exactly.
do not have a particular order. Rather, one recites each of them in response to the condition for which the blessing was instituted at the appropriate time. What is implied? One who fastens his belt while still on his bed recites the blessing, who girds Israel with strength. One who hears the voice of the rooster recites, who gives understanding to the rooster. Any blessing in which one is not obligated should not be recited. What is implied? One who sleeps in his outer garment should not recite the blessing, who clothes the naked upon rising. One who walks barefoot does not recite the blessing, for you have provided me with all my needs. It is the custom of the people in the majority of our cities to recite these blessings one after another in the synagogue, whether or not they are obligated in them. This
right, which is what we do today, right?
Right,
Mhm.
that's what we're, yes. This is a mistake, and it is not proper to follow this practice. One should not recite a blessing unless he is obligated to.
Wow.
Okay.
That's-
Yeah.
Interesting.
So what is what'd you say?
Just said interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. What is Maimonides' reasoning? And do you agree with it? Also another question. We'll see in a minute that people argue with him, but what is his reasoning, and does it resonate with you? Does it make sense to you? That's an open.
Well, is
Yeah,
it kind of
Ellen,
like that? Oh, sorry.
oh,
I don't know why, but I can't see anybody. All I can see is the
okay.
sheet.
So Nancy, you start, and then Ellen will come to you next.
Okay, sorry. I forgot what I was going to say now. That it. What was what? I totally forgot what I was
The
going to
question
say.
was,
Ellen,
what is
go.
Maimonides, like what reasoning lies behind Maimonides' position?
Oh,
like,
right.
and do you,
Yeah,
and
I
does it resonate with you? Do you
So
agree?
it just reminds me of the idea in Judaism of not wasted blessings, but empty blessings.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So saying something that it doesn't pertain to you. So like wasting it, like the fact that if you say too many blessings all the time, they lose their meaning. You
Right.
know. Yes.
Well, there's
So
also
it's
an
like,
idea of bracha levatala, which sort of means, like you're saying, I don't know if that's what you're thinking of, but sorry, a blessing for nothing, as it were. In
yeah,
other words,
well, that goes
if
back-
I say
yeah.
a blessing on, like, I'm going on the lulav and then I don't shake the lulav, that's a bracha levatala. So he doesn't use that language here, but it almost sounds like, that maybe that's, that's
Yeah.
sort
What
of
he's
the
thinking.
directions he's going in. That if I say this blessing on something I didn't do, it's like, Ellen.
And then my question is, and this may
Mhm.
be part of the accepted answer or the practiced answer. What about the Shaliach Tzibor? Would the Shaliach Tzibor say all of the blessings in the Matbeya because they're acting as the emissary?
Right. According to Maimonides' position you're talking about?
I guess what would Maimonides' position be on?
Right. I assume I read him as this wasn't part of what, like, for him, you don't say these blessings at all in synagogue, including the person who's leading the prayer, that this is just what you say on your own. The same way I might wake up and I go to the bathroom and I say the blessing over going to the bathroom, or I do my negel baser netilat yadayim and say the blessing over washing my hands, right?
Oh, okay.
I wake up and I put on my shoes and I say the blessing over putting on my shoes, and it doesn't happen at all in shul, including, I think, including the person who is leading the service also wouldn't say it. That's how I read him.
Okay, I see.
In other words, this fact that, well, he's saying like this custom that we have today of saying these blessings in synagogue is a mistake. He doesn't agree with it. I mean, obviously it existed even back then, or he wouldn't be arguing with it. But yeah, that's how I read it. Yeah, Mom.
That doesn't resonate with me. Couldn't you be grateful that some other person in the Jewish community has shoes, or
Yes,
or
exactly.
isn't the fact of having gratitude in and of itself something that's healthy for the person saying it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so that idea, that's actually what Rav Yosef Karo is going to say in a minute. Maybe you can read it. But yes, that exact idea that even if I, say someone is blind, God forbid, right? They're not, they can't bless God for their sight, for giving sight to the blind. They don't have, but God does give sight to the blind in general, even if he didn't give sight to them, right? So he can make the blessing because this is something that God does in the world, even if he personally doesn't. Yeah. And what was the second thing you said? The second point?
Just the idea, I don't know if it's a Jewish idea or sort of a psychology idea that, having gratitude in general, expressing gratitude is incredibly healthy for the person. Doing it and expressing it.
Right. So one would just, I don't know, in psychology, would that also be about expressing gratitude about things I don't have, but other people have? Maybe.
Yeah, I think just being grateful in general.
Yeah.
And you could be grateful, about somebody else, that somebody else is healthy, or that, that isn't you personally. And it's still, it's just a healthy mindset. It's just, makes you happy.
Right, for sure. Wait, so do you want to, before you turn off your mic, do you want to read Rav Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch?
Oh,
he
sure.
says exactly, well, not him. Well, we'll see. Rav Yosef Karo agrees with Maimonides, and then, I don't know who, just to give a little introduction, in the Shulchan Aruch is of Rav Yosef Karo, and the gloss, the Ramah, he says only when he disagrees. And the Ramah is the Ashkenazi, and Rav Yosef Karo is the Sephardi. So the Ramah is actually who agrees with what you're saying. So but you can read it from the beginning, so you can.
Okay. All of these blessings, if one is not obligated in one of them, for example, that one did not hear the sound of the rooster, or that one did not go out, or he didn't get dressed or didn't put on his belt, one says that blessing, but does not mention the name. And this is this other guy, Rima. I don't know. Rema. And there are those who say that even though one is not obligated in them, one blesses them all, in that the blessing is not just about oneself, but rather we bless that the Holy One, blessed be he, created for the needs of the world. And so it is the practice, and we do not change it.
Right. So that's basically what I read it as what you're saying, that God provides for needs in general. And even if he didn't provide me for this particular need, he did provide other people.
Rachel, you're breaking up even with your camera off.
And therefore we can, what's the logic behind that? All right.
Rachel, I think it might be worth switching to your phone, because you're going between absolutely crackly to very rushed, and that entire source was just gone.
Okay.
I would give you a few minutes to get you set up on another device, but I think for the interest of being able to understand you, it's time to.
It's a problem with the internet, unfortunately. So I'm gonna go off, and I'll go back on my phone, or even I don't even think I have to go off. I mean, I will go off once. Let's see.
Yep, you can please stay on just to keep the sources up, but it might be worth recording and speaking into your phone.
Okay. So I'll turn this one on mute.
Please give us a few moments to get Rachel back on a device where we can hear her teach, and then class will resume. Thank you for your patience. just waiting for, we're just gonna wait for Rachel to join us, and then we'll be back up and going.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, is that better, you think? For now, at least?
For now, you're
For me, it's
make sure you're okay, and you are muted on your other thing just to avoid microphone problems
yes, but I need to turn off the sound.
because you're having very bad echoes.
Yes, that's from, now it's better, yes? Because before you could, yes, before you could hear it, because I could hear you from both devices. Okay. Should I re-say what I just said about?
Yes, before you go, Viter, can you repeat?
Right, so we were talking about this debate between Rav Yosef Karo and Maimonides on the one hand and Ramah on the other, and Ramah basically said that, like what my mother was arguing, that we bless God because even if he didn't help us in this way, he didn't provide for our needs in this way, he did provide for somebody else's needs. So my question was whether anybody wanted to defend Maimonides and Rav Yosef Karo's position. What's the logic behind their position that we should only say the blessings when we're actually doing the thing, you know, when the thing is actually happening to us. I mean, Nancy already spoke about the idea of like the blessing you name, but like how, yeah, just sort of elaborating on that. What is the, yeah.
Nancy?
It worked. I understand. Well, it just, again, it brings me back to that whole concept of community. And, you know, we're not, I know for ourselves, we're for the community. So again, even though we didn't particularly, you know, experience whatever that is we're asking or blessing, thanking for, somebody else is in our community. So it just brings me back to that whole thing about how important community is in our prayers.
For sure. But you're still defending the Ramah.
Yeah, yes, I am
that's
actually.
a different argument. It's a different argument and a different, you know, it's a different reasoning, which is that it's like an important part of our prayer to pray for the community. So therefore, the blessing is not a blessing name because we're blessing God for fulfilling the needs of our community, which I really like that idea. But does anyone still have some way to? Does someone have a way to? Does anyone want to defend also the Rav Yosef Karo? Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, can I back Nancy up and saying that even if you're not talking about somebody else in the community, you're talking about oneself. If rather than being so literal about it, one could say, you know, whether or not you open your eyes, in a way you're opening your eyes, whether or not you stand up straight, in a way you're going to be standing, you know, if you interpret it more metaphorically, all of these things could certainly apply to any individual.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like before I learned the source, that's often the way I did interpret many of these. In other words, giving sight to the blind does not necessarily mean literally giving us sight, but giving us insight perhaps, or, you know, or setting, which is the one they have that's very relevant today, setting captives free, right?
Right, assuming that somebody in the distant past meant everything they said quite literally, sometimes can be a mistake, that they're quite capable of using metaphoric language.
For sure, and some of it is not even, in other words, they take language that is more metaphoric and interpret it literally, like the example of the captives, right? Let me look back on that one. Right, they say upon sitting up straight, one should say, "Blessed who sets up captives free." Now that's actually who sets captives free. It's not about standing up straight, but like that's sort of almost a more physical, you know, literal interpretation, right? Where the set captives free could be looked at in any number of ways, for sure, definitely.
Maybe you could make like a pedagogical argument about this in favor of Maimonides, not so much that you shouldn't do it if you're not actually doing the action related to it, but that it has more meaning, and it, you know, like especially for a little kid or somebody, like it makes more sense if you think about it attached to a physical thing, and that if you're in the routine of something, it's like taking a pill in the morning. If you take it at some random time, I'm going to take it at 8 o'clock, it has no meaning, and maybe you forget to do it. But if you say, I'm going to do it while I'm eating breakfast, it's like attaching it to a routine, I think is an important idea. I don't agree with them, you shouldn't do it if you don't, but I do agree with that part of it, that attaching it to something physical makes it more powerful.
Yeah, that's a very OT kind of.
Yeah, he's attaching it to an activity of daily living. What can I say?
My mother is an occupational therapist, right? He doesn't know. But right, attaching, right? We sit in synagogue, we just say all these words, and like, what does it mean? So like here, attaching it to these words to a physical activity definitely gives it meaning. Yeah. Did anyone else want to add anything else in defense of Maimonides? Before meaning I would add that there's some, like the way Maimonides looks at prayer, at least in this source, it seems like it's a more sort of a spontaneous, genuine blessing, perhaps, in the sense that it's like attached to what you're actually giving thanks for. If you're not giving thanks for it, you shouldn't say it. In other words, it's like, it's prayer as sort of a response to life, and to things we're going about doing, which, like, there's a conversation that people have a lot about prayer. In other words, like, why do we have this long set liturgy? Why don't we just pray when, when I'm happy about something, I pray. When I'm thankful, I spontaneously pray. When I want to ask God for something, I ask God for something. Like, why do we have this long liturgy? So like the Maimonides way seems more like prayer as a spontaneous, still not really spontaneous, because we have these fixed words of the blessings, but like as a more direct response to what's happening in our lives. So I would say that on the Maimonides side. One sort of
Rachel, you're breaking up again. One moment while Rachel gets back on. Rachel, is everything okay? You on your, oh, I can see you. All right. I thought you froze.
Can you hear me?
You're a little quiet. You're a little quiet, but I can hear you.
Yeah, I'll try to put my phone closer to me. Okay, so one way of sort of bridging this gap between Maimonides and Rav Yosef Karo on the one hand and the Ramah on the other is to sort of try to reattach the blessings, at least in our mind, even if we're not physically doing the action. Nice idea. Yeah, someone read it. Alan? Is Alan unmuting herself? No. Okay, I'll go ahead then. We suggest a natural expression of this idea. And the person says each of these blessings in the synagogue, the person should remember the process of waking up in the morning. Such that when he says the general words of praise, who gives sight to the blind, regarding the entire world, we are reminded of opening our eyes in the morning and thank God for this. So he tries to like go both ways, right? we say, everybody says we give sight to the blind because at least somewhere in the world, God's giving sight to the blind. But while we're saying we give sight to the blind, we remember in the morning how we opened our eyes and God gave sight to us. So we like sort of picture, we picture in our head the moment this morning when I opened my eyes. In this way, you should recreate giving thanks for what we enjoyed. And the words of praise regarding the entire world will be filled with life. So on the one hand, we say these words of praise because somewhere out there in the world, God is doing these things. But on the other hand, we do want to make them personal and fill them with life. So we do, even though we're already at synagogue and these, we've already opened our eyes and all these things have already happened, we sort of picture them in their mind in order to make them more personal. So I like that idea. Okay. So this, I would say, this argument between Maimonides and Rav Yosef Karo on the one hand and the Ramah on the other hand, I think gets to a tension in how we view prayer that is going to come up again and again and again in this class, which is sort of the extent to which prayer is powerful because it's like a fixed text. And I think a lot of that is also related to what Nancy's been talking about. It keeps about this idea of community, right? Like the fixed text is what gives us community also. That's not where the source here is going, but I think that's a very important part of a fixed text. Like I walk into a shul anytime, any place in the world, and I understand, I can follow along. And if I, time travel, that also, to several generations before, to my great grandparents' shul, I would also be able to follow on. So it goes both horizontally and vertically. So it's also a lot about community. Rav Yishai Leibowitz actually brings in a different direction. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Rav Yishai Leibowitz, but he's also a modern Israeli thinker. And this is very much reflective of his general sort of philosophy of Judaism. Someone want to read. So he's on the side of prayer but the power of prayer comes from it being fixed, right? Which is more the Ramah. One way of looking at the Ramah, right? The idea that we have to see these blessings no matter what, even if it's not. I'm not actually thanking God for something that happened to me personally. Does someone want to read Andrea, did you want to say something? Yeah.
No, I was going to say I could read because I.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go for it. Read Rav Yishai.
Prayer as shaped in the prayer book is an entirely different matter. It is obligatory and fixed. Consider what these two properties imply. As obligatory, it is not what a person desires, but what is demanded of him. Not prayer initiated by him, but one imposed on him. As fixed, it does not vary with the changing circumstances or states, objective or subjective, in which the praying individual finds himself. Hence, it does not reflect the state of mind or situation of the praying person. Such a prayer is not intended to satisfy a need. I do the next paragraph.
Yeah, keep going.
The grandeur and power of prayer that is mandatory and fixed by halacha, lie precisely in setting aside all of man's interests and motives out of awareness of man's position before God, a position which is always the same regardless of any personal circumstances. Man relinquishes his own will in the recognition of the duty of worship. The same set of 18 benedictions is required of the bridegroom as of the widower returning from his wife's funeral. The same series of psalms is recited by one enjoying the world and in one whose whole world has collapsed. The identical supplications are required of those who feel the need for them and those who do not.
Yeah. So he goes a different direction, less about community and more in keeping with his general philosophy. This is about the idea that we perform mitzvot out of a sense of obligation to God and not out of our own personal interests. That's his whole philosophy of prayer. What I italicized that the same series of Psalms is recited by one enjoying the world and one whose world has collapsed, because I saw over the last couple of weeks, and first of all, we had Rosh Chodesh, it was like a week after, right? October 7th was Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. And there was a lot of conversation, like, how are we going to say Hallel, right? All these songs of praise when all these horrible things have just happened, right? And then and there was a whole long conversation on this, like, rabbi's listserv and on about that. And whether we should, and whether, I think most people then said we should, but like, we're saying it with a different understanding. And then someone brought up, it's not only Hallel, it's Sukkot Zimra. It's like the beginning, it's the songs of praise we say at the beginning in the morning. How can we say them when, like it says here, when whose whole world has collapsed? That people are finding it difficult even to say those right now. And Rabbi Shaya Leibowitz sort of says that it's powerful because it's like our way of showing that our commitment to God is more important than our personal, wherever we are personally right now, that we say these things no matter what. Another way to look at it would be what Nancy said, that we say these things and sort of, as a part of a community, even if we personally are not feeling it. Does anyone, well, actually, let's read Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, and then if anyone has any. I think we'll save number 14 for next week since we're about to run out of time. Does someone want to? So Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, the Rav, as is sometimes called in America, talks about prayer from a bit of a different perspective. Does someone want to read that quickly? Michelle? Nancy?
You want me to read it, Rach?
Yeah, sure.
You want me?
Yeah, go ahead. Right.
Okay. Prayer is a vital need for the religious individual. He cannot stop the thoughts and emotions, deliberations, and troubles which surge through the depths of his soul, his hopes and aspirations, his despair and bitterness. In short, the great wealth that is concealed in his religious consciousness. It is impossible to halt the liturgical outpouring of these feelings. Prayer is essential. Fresh, vibrant religious feeling cannot exist without it. In other words, power is justified by virtue of the fact that it is impossible to exist without it.
So for Rav Soloveitchik, it's sort of in some ways the opposite, at least in this, right? That prayer is sort of a expression of our natural emotional state, and that we naturally, like human beings, naturally have the need to sort of for their feelings to come out, and we need prayer, right? I think here it's prayer writ large also, right? Not just like prayer as as Jews practice it right now, but prayer is in general, right? And like also for other religions. Yeah. Any before we wrap up, anyone want to give a word in favor, or in favor of Rachael Leibowitz or Soloveitchik? Like which approach resonates with you?
Well, I was thinking with the Leibowitz one, it's sort of like if you're saying Kaddish, if given the choice and you're feeling really sad and despairing and missing the person, you might not go to shul and do it, but then because you feel obligated, you go, and it's a good thing. So there is something to say about having this routine of things, and it's not about your feeling at the moment.
Right, because we wouldn't do it. In other words, we only pray when we're spontaneously feeling like praying, it would happen a lot more rarely, right? The routine, like I like to think of it as like the routine sort of like gives us the opportunity to feel the feelings, like we wouldn't otherwise, because otherwise we probably wouldn't go that much, It's like, and I thought we were even going to go a different direction with Kaddish, which is also like the words of Kaddish, right? We might not be feeling like the words of Kaddish are all about how great is God, which also someone who just lost a loved one is not necessarily feeling so sincerely about, but prayer said that, that Judaism
traditional Judaism says that this is what you say, even if you're not feeling so much like, I mean, it's actually an excellent example for the situation we're in right now. Like, even if we're not so much feeling like praising God, we still wake up in the morning, we still say Madani, and we still say the Psuke de Zimra, the songs of praise, which we'll talk about a lot more next week. Even if we're not maybe still feeling like the world is like the greatest place right now. But hopefully, out of that will, that will give us the opportunity, or that will, like, going back to the source at the very beginning of Reb Sachs, where he says, it trains us to give thanks, right? Like sometimes we need the routine to like train us, right? Like we need help getting there. It's not always so easy, but we're like, sometimes we don't feel so thankful. Like maybe right now we don't feel so thankful. But having that routine trains us to give thanks for the sheer gift of being alive.
I think it also makes it easier for us because a lot of people myself included, actually feel, can't think of the word I'm failing of, but oh God, it's right there. We would have a hard time having to come up with our own prayer and our own words. So in some ways, it's nice to have the words there for you that you can say, and if you want to, add to it or whatever, and make it more individual as you can. But it kind of takes that pressure off of you to have to actually come up with your own prayers this way. Less of an excuse not to do it, having it right there in front of you.
Yeah, it's not so easy to always think to every morning think of your own prayers. But then of course the trick is like the source we said, to imagine like what happened to you this morning. In other words, to in your head to make the connection so it's actually happening in your life, and to fill it with life, as that the Tarragon, that source Tarragon and Rubenstein talked about. Like that's the flip side. That's the challenge. Okay, so thanks so much, everyone. Next
you.
we will talk about Psuke de Zimra, about the songs of praise.
That sounds great. And just to close things out, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
And we will have Learning Continues tomorrow with our rotating Parsha Shir at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and a class on the life and Torah of Franz Rosenzweig with Rabbi Truboff at 2 p.m. And of course, Mishnah Yomi continues on Sundays with Rabbi Silver. Take care, everyone, and I hope to see as many of you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.